Testing, 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 testing. How y'all doing this afternoon? Everyone, y'all all right? Of course, we're just waiting on the presentation to start. I can at least introduce myself. My name is Asar Imhotep. I'm trained as a computer scientist, but I also do historical comparative linguistics. And the title of my presentation today is going to be the etymology of the word Kemet, a reanalysis of the Diop-Obenga Hypothesis. So, as soon as that comes up, we'll get started. So what happened? Do I need to come back there? Okay. Okay. So as I mentioned before, this is going to be a linguistic analysis. So we're going to be dealing with historical comparative linguistics today. The etymology of the word Kemet, a critical reexamination of the Diop-Obenga Hypothesis. I want to first start off with a quote from Obenga, who in an interview, I won't read the top portion, but he says, "It bothers me when someone takes me on my word without developing a means of verifying what I say. We must form a scientific spirit capable of seeing even the weaknesses of our own proofs, of seeing the unfinished side of our work, and of committing ourselves to completing it. You understand? Therefore, we should then have a work which could honestly stand criticism, because what we've done would have been placed on a scientific plane." I put this here because when I presented this initially, someone, a very prominent scholar, told me that I was taking Egyptology or taking Black studies back 30 years by challenging what Diop wrote, in his earlier text. And Diop told me to do it. That's my excuse. To skip over the issues, primarily, there's been a long-going debate on what the word Kemet means. Does it mean the Black land or the Black people? And it's been ongoing since really the 60s. I argue that both claims assume that the root of Kemet is the word Kim. Oh, these are my primary issues, or excuse me, the primary two hypotheses. And then I also note that both claims assume that the root of Kemet is the word Kim, meaning Black and Egyptian. And so these are my issues with the debate that has been happening so far. One, they ignore chronology. Two, they ignore the earliest usages of the term Kemet, which actually wasn't in use until around the 11th to 12th dynasty. So Kemet really didn't have a name until that point. They just call it Henu, which means the interior. But not until around the Middle Kingdom did they actually start using Kemet and Tameri. They ignore the classifiers. Most people call them determinatives, written in the earliest forms. And both hypotheses fail to support the idea that the root of Kemet is Kim, Black. We know that the Egyptologists in general argue that Kemet means Black land. The origin of the Kemet means Black people comes from this text here, and of course, Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, and that is the genetic relationship of Pharaonic Egyptian and Negro African languages, translated from the French. Obenga has since, continued his arguments that was initially there. There's a problem with assuming that the word Kemet and the word Kim, meaning black, is the root. The ancient Egyptian language did not write its vowels. So if we was just to do a test real quick, this is from the Kalajan language in East Africa and Kenya. These are words with the consonants Km.t or just Km. If we didn't have the vowels, how would you know what word we were talking about here? To pick one of these and assume that Kemet means, dark, it's methodologically flawed. And so the ancient Egyptians actually helped us with this problem. And so this is just to show that there are many Kims and Kemets in the actual language. So how did they determine that Kim black was the root when we have all these other different words? What was the selection process? People just assume Kemet means black. This is one of the earliest inscriptions that has the word Kemet in it. And you'll see that it has a different determinative here than the 049 that everyone is used to seeing. See, part of the argument is that Kemet doesn't mean land because it allegedly doesn't have a land determinative. Well, this is a land determinative here. So it lets you know that it has to deal with the land and not people. These are the early classifiers. So when you say Kemet here, this is the N23, this is the Gardner signs, N23, this is the irrigated land classifier. The N36 is a canal. And then the 049 determinant, this is the more popular one. This is the one that everyone knows when they recognize the word Kemet in the hieroglyphs. Everyone interprets this as a crossroads, but that is not the case. It is actually just another variation of irrigated land. And we know this because they're interchangeable. And so here's a word, we pronounce it Sapat, but it's a district known necropolis. These determinatives, the only difference really between these two is the classifiers. And so they're interchangeable. And even in the Ermin and Grappa Waterbush, for the word Kemet here, they tell you the three determinatives that are used and that they're interchangeable. So if you have an irrigated land determinative, which informs you of what the root means. So to solve that problem with the consonants, only using the consonants and not the vowels, they put these other signs that weren't meant to be vocalized at the end of the word that lets you know the context for which the word is. It's a classifier. It's just like in the Bantu languages. So if I say mu into, I'm letting you know that's a singular person. The mu is a classifier. If I say ba into, that's the plural classifier. It lets you know that the into belongs to the human class. So that makes sense. So in the same logic, that's how the ancient Egyptian script is used. And so this is from a text here to let you know that the this N23 canal is actually a Middle Kingdom innovation. These signs right here, the N20 and N22, these are what they call tongues of land. So just stretches of land. So that was the original determinatives, and then they simplified it and made this one. So it's letting you know this irrigated land. There's also a misnomer that Kemet is terminated by a quote-unquote feminine T. It is not a feminine T. It's a T nonetheless, but again, we don't have vowels. So they just assume anything terminated with a T is a so-called feminine T. What I argue is that it is actually another classifier, but built into the language, not strictly the script. It lets you know that it is a place, a land, T. And so most most names for places in the ancient Egyptian language it'll be terminated by T or it'll be terminated by W. And both of these are classifiers for land that let you know there's a space. So a storehouse, place, storehouse again, the temple, pavilion, festival place. I do comparisons with the Sumerian language, and I can tell you that Sumerian is related to Bantu, is related to ancient Egyptian. And so Sumerian is going to help us out today. So that T suffix corresponds to Sumerian ki prefix. It's the same chi prefix that you'll find in Bantu. So if you hear Asante say Chikam for Kemet, because that chi is a prefix for place. And so it's the same thing in Sumerian. And so you can see just a few examples here, Kiduru, Kidur, stool, and there's the prefixes and suffixes for place also double as the abstract. And so that's another topic into itself. What I argue is that the cognate for Kemet in the Sumerian language is Kiduru, which means damp ground, irrigable land. And the way that we can demonstrate this is by doing a linguistic analysis. So what we do is we establish sound laws. We match consonant for consonant in each language. So in the Sumerian language, in the first consonant column, you see that it corresponds to K in Egyptian. So I put the correspondences laws, over here on the far end. And where you see like the second consonant in Sumerian, either N, L, or R, these sounds interchange within Sumerian. So these are dialectical, but they're virtually the same. And I have a paper, and I give, of course, dozens of more examples to establish the fact. But you see that it corresponds to the M in Egyptian. And so this is how we set it. We set it up. We know that it's regular and that they correspond. So we know there's a relationship between the two languages. And so I argue that the Kim in Kemet is really to be interpreted in the same way that Sumerian is a wet, irrigated, damp, fresh. And then Kemet, when you put the T suffix, it becomes, a place, a damp ground, an irrigable land. It makes sense, especially when you know that there's other chems in the language. So there's a chemu, seeds or fruit from the chem plant, and then Kemet, grain or plant, because it has to deal with agricultural space and not doing the same method. I can go into Chiluba. We'll see that the K's correspond, and then the ND and the M's correspond between the languages. So when you say Kanda in Bantu, you're saying cognates with Kemet. And so to Kemet, the country, in Chiluba would be Chiankanda. What I've shown in my paper is that there's Kemet all across Africa, and none of them have to do with the color of the people's skin or the color of the land. It has to correspond with a type of land or water. And so this is just a small example of all the kandas that you will find like in Central and West Africa. It is one of the most representative words that are cognate for Kemet, but you'll find Kama, and even the word Congo itself is cognate with Kemet. So when you say Uganda, Uganda is a Bantu variant of saying the word Kemet. It's also, one of my tests is that if it's going to be representative for land, I'll also find examples for water and rivers. And that's exactly what you find here, is Kanda, Okanda, Kanda, all streams and rivers in Africa. And so you're seeing that the languages are matching the determinatives that we saw in the actual hieroglyphs in terms of irrigated land and water channels. And so the Herero language for their word Oenganda, I think has the best definition, which I redefined the word Kemet. And you can use it for village or a state, but it simply means properly a new pasturage with an abundance of grass and water. So when you're talking about a Kemet, that's what you're talking about. And it matches the signs in which we see. And so these are the cognates, I've said that already. And so as an active agency, I decided to rename Africa Bukanda in the spirit of more recent events. And so use it if you like. Now you know the origins. We don't have to fight over it. Is African an African word, all this other kind of stuff. We know, everywhere that Bukanda, Congo, Bukam, all of that, same as Kemet, is all across Africa. So that's my time, and I thank you all.